Hello and welcome. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to take a look at just one day's worth of headlines to see what they can tell us about the huge pressures shaping Canada right now, from its economy all the way to its national identity.
And it's a pretty wild question, right? What can just one day in the news really tell you? Well, as you're about to see, these stories, they aren't just random noise. They're like clues pointing to these massive forces bubbling under the surface. We're talking serious economic headwinds, boiling political tensions, and some really big policy shifts. And they're all happening at the exact same time.
So, let's kick things off with the economy. Because honestly, Canada is really feeling the squeeze right now, from pretty much every direction. And that means the government is in a tough spot, forced to make some hard calls that are going to impact, well, pretty much everyone. And this quote right here, it's basically a giant flashing sign that things are changing. After a long time of pretty high spending, the government is hitting the brakes. They're basically saying, okay, the party's over. Welcome to the age of austerity. The message couldn't be clearer. The national purse strings are tightening and some difficult decisions are on the horizon.
So you might be asking, why the sudden change of heart? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is this one number, 2%. That's the magic number for NATO's defense spending target. And well, hitting that target costs a lot of money. Money that has to come from somewhere, which means, you guessed it, cuts in other places.
Okay, so what does this belt tightening actually look like for the average Canadian? Well, the government's kind of drawn a line in the sand. They're saying essential services, think healthcare, education, those are safe, they're protected. But, and this is a really big but, other programs, the ones deemed non-essential, they're basically on the chopping block.
But here's where it gets complicated. Even while they're cutting back at home, the government is still playing defense on the world stage. They're putting together aid packages for key industries like aluminum, steel, and canola, sectors that have just been hammered by international tariffs. So it's this crazy balancing act, right? Cutting spending with one hand while trying to put out economic fires with the other.
And if you want a perfect picture of what those external pressures look like, here it is. Look at what's happened to U.S. duties on Canadian lumber. They've skyrocketed, more than doubled. This isn't just some abstract number on a chart. This is a direct hit on a major Canadian export, a real cornerstone of the economy.
All right, so we've seen the economic pressure cooker. But this stuff doesn't just stay in spreadsheets and government reports. No, it's spilling over, creating some very real tensions and conflicts right here on the home front.
And you want to talk about drama? Look no further. So Diageo, the company that makes Crown Royal, announces they're moving about 200 bottling jobs down to the U.S. How does Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford, respond? By literally dumping a bottle on camera and calling for a nationwide boycott. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's pure political theater, a really fiery protest against jobs heading south of the border. At the same time, a totally different kind of fight was heating up over in Alberta. This was a cultural one. A really controversial policy led to schools actually pulling classic novels off the shelves, books like 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale. And you gotta love the irony, right? Removing books that are famous for being about censorship. Well, the public outcry was so fast and so loud that the government basically had to slam the brakes and go, okay, let's rethink this. And then, in the middle of all these political and cultural firestorms, something truly awful happened. A devastating tragedy, a mass stabbing at Hollow Water First Nation in Manitoba. It left the whole community just reeling. 2 people were killed, including the suspect, and at least 6 more were injured. It's just a heartbreaking reminder that beyond the headlines and debates, there are these incredibly profound human challenges the country is dealing with. Okay, so let's shift gears now. We've looked inside Canada's borders, but now let's look at how Canada is presenting itself to the rest of the world. Because a country that's long had a reputation for being really welcoming, well, it's making a pretty dramatic policy change, especially when it comes to international students.
Get ready for this number, because it is absolutely staggering. 62%. That's the projected student visa rejection rate for 2025. That is the highest it's been in 10 years. This isn't a small tweak. This is a massive, fundamental shift in immigration policy.
Let me put that a different way, just so it really sinks in. Imagine 100 students applying for a visa to study in Canada. Under this new projection, 62 of them, 62, are getting a no. That's the new, much, much tougher reality for anyone hoping to study here.
And it gets even more intense. For students from certain countries, the odds are even worse. Take applicants from India, for example, who have historically been a huge source of international students for Canada. A shocking 80% of them were rejected. 80%! That really shows you this isn't some blanket policy. It's hitting some groups way harder than others.
So, what's behind this huge spike in rejections? It really comes down to three main things. First, the money. Applicants are under a microscope financially. They have to prove they have more cash available. Second, the standards are just higher. Officials are using tougher criteria to evaluate everybody. And third, let's be clear, this is a conscious policy decision. It's a deliberate move to slow down the number of international students coming into the country.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, right? We've looked at the economic squeeze, the tensions at home, and this huge shift in immigration. So what's the big picture? What happens when you put all these puzzle pieces from just a single day together? What does it tell us about where Canada is heading?
Well, when you step back and connect the dots, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. It's all about pressure and response. You've got global economic pressure, the response is austerity and specific aid. You've got job losses, the response is a political boycott. You've got massive global demand for student spots, the response is to slam the door a little tighter. It really feels like Canada is in this constant state of reacting to all these forces.
And all of this brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? We've just seen a snapshot, just one single day, of a nation that's wrestling with its budget, its very identity, and its role on the world stage. So as it's being pushed and pulled from all these different directions, trying to keep its balance, you have to wonder, what kind of Canada is going to emerge on the other side of all this pressure?